Imagine Boston, 1920. The Roaring Twenties were just beginning, a time of dizzying change, new wealth, and intoxicating optimism. After the Great War, everyone was looking for a fresh start, a way to catch up, to get rich quick. The stock market was booming, but for ordinary folks, the path to prosperity often seemed out of reach, complicated and risky. It was into this fertile ground of hope and ambition that a seemingly unassuming man, an Italian immigrant named Charles Ponzi, stepped forward with a promise that seemed too good to be true, a miracle in a world hungry for one. But who was Charles Ponzi? Not quite the financial wizard he would soon claim to be. Born Carlo Pietro Giovanni Guglielmo Tebaldo Ponzi in Lugo, Italy in 1882, he arrived in America in 1903 with just $2.50 to his name, having gambled away the rest of his savings on the voyage. For years, he bounced between odd jobs, running afoul of the law in Canada for forging bad checks and in the US for smuggling immigrants. A charismatic but restless soul, he was always searching for his big break, often looking for the easiest path. Then, in 1919, opportunity seemingly knocked. Ponzi received a letter from Spain requesting a business directory. Inside, he found something peculiar, an international reply coupon, or IRC. These coupons were redeemable for postage stamps in any universal postal union country. The idea was simple. You could buy an IRC in one country, say Italy, where it cost less due to wartime exchange rates, and redeem it in another, like the United States, for a higher value. This arbitrage, a risk-free profit from price differences, seemed like a stroke of genius. Ponzi's initial calculation was dazzling. He believed he could buy these IRCs cheaply in post-war Europe, convert them into more valuable US stamps, and then sell the stamps for cash, netting a huge profit. On paper, it sounded brilliant, promising astronomical returns. The problem? He completely underestimated the logistical nightmare and the actual costs involved. Exchanging vast quantities of small-denomination coupons into cash was practically impossible on a large scale. The coupons were designed for personal use, not for grand financial schemes. The entire operation was fundamentally flawed from the outset. Undeterred by practicalities, or perhaps simply ignoring them, Ponzi decided to sell the idea of this arbitrage. He launched the Securities Exchange Company in Boston, initially promising a 50% return on investments in just 90 days. Think about that, 50% in 3 months. That's an annual return of 200%. In an era where bank savings accounts offered 5%, this was an unheard-of proposition. He promised to use investor funds to buy and redeem the IRCs, leveraging his supposed secret system. The lure of such easy wealth was irresistible.
For a while, it worked. Ponzi paid his initial investors exactly as promised, using money from subsequent investors to cover the early payouts. This cycle, a fundamental characteristic of his scheme, created a powerful illusion of success. Word spread like wildfire through Boston's immigrant communities, particularly among Italian Americans who trusted one of their own. Early investors, thrilled with their quick profits, reinvested and encouraged friends and family to join. The company quickly outgrew its small office, and lines began forming outside his doors. The money started pouring in. Within months, Ponzi was raking in $250,000 a day, an astronomical sum for the 1920s. He became a local celebrity, living an extravagant lifestyle that flaunted his newfound wealth. He bought a mansion, acquired expensive cars, and was always seen wearing impeccably tailored suits. This conspicuous display of luxury further convinced the public of his genius. If he was that rich, surely his investors would be too. The illusion was powerful, intoxicating, and seemingly unstoppable. As Ponzi's fame grew, so did the scrutiny. Local newspapers, at first impressed, began to ask questions. Financial experts and bankers were baffled by how Ponzi could consistently deliver such impossible returns. Could there truly be a hidden arbitrage opportunity that no one else had discovered? Or was something far more sinister at play? The Boston Post, a prominent newspaper, spearheaded the investigation, driven by a growing sense of unease. They knew if something seemed too good to be true, it almost certainly was. Regulators, too, started circling. The Massachusetts Bank Commissioner, Joseph Allen, publicly expressed concerns about Ponzi's operations, warning that his promised returns were unsustainable. He urged the public to exercise caution, highlighting the lack of transparency in Ponzi's business model. Yet the warnings fell largely on deaf ears. The allure of quick profits, combined with Ponzi's charismatic denials and reassurances, overpowered the measured skepticism of official warnings. People wanted to believe in the miracle, not the statistics. Ponzi continued to pay out his investors, often drawing huge crowds to his offices. These regular payments reinforced the public's trust and silenced many critics. He even opened a second company, the Hanover Trust, further legitimizing his operations by associating with a real bank. This seemingly unbreakable cycle of payouts, however, was simply a shell game. Each new dollar invested was immediately used to pay off older investors. The vast majority of the money never touched a single international reply coupon. It was a classic pyramid, built on a mountain of new money.
By July 1920, Ponzi was handling millions of dollars, but the cracks were beginning to show. The Boston Post published an article revealing that his claimed IRC operations were virtually non-existent. They highlighted that to generate his claimed profits, Ponzi would have needed to process an impossible number of coupons, far more than even existed globally. This was the first major blow to his credibility, forcing people to confront the glaring inconsistencies in his story. The public's faith, though still strong, was beginning to waver. The bank commissioner, now with more ammunition, called in independent auditor Edwin G. Pryor to scrutinize Ponzi's books. Pryor quickly discovered the fundamental truth: Ponzi was deeply insolvent. He was essentially running a deficit of millions of dollars, relying entirely on new money to pay old debts. There was no real investment, no legitimate business generating the promised returns. The numbers simply didn't add up, confirming the Post's suspicions and the regulators' worst fears. The house of cards was poised to tumble. Facing overwhelming evidence, Ponzi tried to buy time and public opinion. He took out full-page ads in newspapers, proclaiming his innocence and attacking his accusers. He even opened his books to a friendly investigation, attempting to spin the narrative. He was a master manipulator, using his charisma to deflect criticism and maintain the loyalty of his investors, many of whom still fiercely defended him, convinced he was being unfairly targeted by the establishment. The desperate struggle to control the narrative had begun. But the final, fatal blow came from an unexpected source: Clarence W. Barron, the influential publisher of the Boston News Bureau and the financial weekly Barron's. After his own thorough investigation, Barron declared unequivocally that Ponzi was an absolutely hopeless financial rogue, and that his scheme was mathematically impossible. Barron's damning pronouncement, coming from a respected financial authority, shattered any remaining illusion of Ponzi's legitimacy. The public finally began to grasp the true extent of the deception. Panic ensued. Investors, finally understanding the gravity of the situation, rushed to Ponzi's office and to Hanover Trust, demanding their money back. The lines that once signified prosperity now symbolized desperation and fear. Ponzi, with no real assets or investments, couldn't possibly pay everyone. The illusion collapsed under the weight of its own unsustainability. The once mighty financial guru was revealed as a fraud, and thousands of ordinary people faced financial ruin. The dream of easy money turned into a nightmare. On August 10, 1920, after weeks of escalating panic and investigations, Charles Ponzi was arrested. He faced multiple charges of mail fraud, a federal offense, and state charges of larceny. The man who had promised to make everyone rich was now behind bars. His empire of lies crumbled. The charismatic smile was gone, replaced by a grim reality. The once celebrated financial genius was now publicly exposed as one of the greatest swindlers in American history. Justice, though delayed, was finally catching up. The financial devastation was immense. An estimated 40,000 people had invested with Ponzi, losing approximately $20 million in 1920 money, which would be over $250 million today. Many investors had put their life savings, inheritances, and even mortgages into Ponzi's scheme. Homes were lost, families were broken, and trust in financial institutions was severely shaken. The promise of prosperity had turned into a bitter lesson in the cost of unchecked greed and blind faith. Boston was left reeling. Ponzi's legal battles dragged on for years. He was found guilty of mail fraud and sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. But that wasn't the end. Upon his release, he faced additional state charges, leading to further convictions and more prison time. He tried to appeal, he tried to escape, but the net had closed around him. His saga became a prolonged public spectacle, serving as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of financial fraud. The legal system, slow but sure, had its say. It was during these investigations and trials that the term Ponzi scheme was coined and entered the popular lexicon. It became the shorthand for any investment fraud that pays returns to earlier investors from the capital paid by subsequent investors rather than from actual profit. Ponzi didn't invent the concept of a pyramid scheme, which existed in various forms before him, but his grand, audacious, and widely publicized deception gave the timeless swindle its enduring name. He made it famous, or rather, infamous. After serving his time, Ponzi was deported back to Italy in 1934, a disgraced man. But his appetite for schemes remained. He tried his hand at various ventures, including becoming an agent for Benito Mussolini's government in Brazil during World War II. None of these ever achieved the scale or notoriety of his Boston scam. He lived his later years in relative obscurity and poverty, a stark contrast to the lavish lifestyle he once enjoyed at the height of his deception. The once bright star had faded.
Charles Ponzi died in 1949 in a charity hospital in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, at the age of 66. Towards the end of his life, he was interviewed and, with characteristic audacity, famously declared, "I went looking for trouble, and I found it." He never truly expressed remorse for the thousands he ruined, seemingly convinced that he was merely a victim of circumstances or that his initial intentions were noble. His self-perception remained clouded, even as his legacy was firmly cemented in the annals of financial fraud. The story of Charles Ponzi is more than just a historical footnote. It's a timeless warning. Even today, the appeal of easy money and promises of impossibly high returns continue to lure victims. From sophisticated financial products to online scams, the underlying psychology remains the same. The desire for quick wealth, the trust placed in charismatic figures, and the human tendency to ignore red flags when the potential rewards seem so great. Ponzi exploited a fundamental human weakness that persists across generations. So what can we learn? The Ponzi scheme vividly illustrates the critical importance of due diligence. Always ask, how does this investment actually generate its returns? If the answer is vague, complex, or relies on some secret method, it's a massive red flag. Legitimate investments usually involve real businesses, real growth, and real risks. An investment that promises high returns with no risk is almost certainly a fantasy, designed to separate you from your money. Trust but verify, especially with your finances. Ponzi's downfall also underscored the necessity of robust financial regulation. While no system is perfect, government oversight, bank commissioners, and investigative bodies play a vital role in protecting the public from predatory schemes. Their warnings, though sometimes unpopular, are crucial for maintaining market integrity and investor confidence. The lessons learned from Ponzi's era helped shape modern financial protections, though the battle against fraud is a continuous one, adapting to new technologies and new forms of deception. Charles Ponzi's story is a foundational chapter in financial history, a cautionary tale etched into the very language of fraud. It reminds us that while innovation can create incredible opportunities, it can also be twisted for nefarious purposes. The mail coupon miracle was never a miracle at all, but a masterclass in deception, a stark reminder that true wealth is built on genuine value, not on the impossible promises of a charlatan. And that, my friends, is a truth as old as money itself, and one we must never forget.